Hello and welcome for this presentation of my photographic notes for October 2021. So, like every month, I'll be presenting a small selection of the photos I took or that I started post-producing from film or from digital cameras. And here we go, let's start. First picture on the left, that's an interesting technique. For those of you who do pinhole photography, this was taken with a Leica M240 camera, which is a digital camera with a CMOS sensor, and a Pinhole Pro lens from Thingify, which was a lens that was kickstarted, crowd-funded a few years back, which offers a pinhole lens. So a pinhole lens, for those who don't know, it's basically a small hole that, being very small, acts like a lens. It's not a lens, it's actually empty. But the particular thing of this lens is you can choose the diameter of the hole. It's a pretty well-made, solid metal lens with very precise mechanics, and offers 0.1, 0.15, 0.2, 0.25, 0.3, 0.35, 0.5, and 0.8 sized hole. And that's what you get. I believe it was a 0.8 millimeter setting I used. The smaller the hole, the more in focus the image will be. And that was basically a photo I took from a room which had drapes on the windows of a tree somewhere near Basel in Switzerland. With those lenses, you either have to do long exposures because there's really very little light going through the hole, or you'll push the sensor. In that case, I pushed the sensor so you get this really characteristic grain of that particular camera. So that's something I've been practicing. I might do a video about pinhole photography, but one example here. On the right change of camera, we go towards an Leica M8 rangefinder camera with probably 90mm f2.5 lens. Not sure. Again, my description might differ from the French version of this video because my memory might remember things a bit different. So, but here I think it's a 92.5 f2.5 lens from Leica. The interesting thing with those CCDs is always the color rendering of the image, the softness, and the color science behind that camera was quite interesting. I believed it kind of looks very analog. And here's those two next photos, which were taken in Rome, again with the M8, but using a lens which I've talked about in other videos, the Super Angulon 21mm f4.0 from the 1950s. A combination I love. Very good geometry. The rendering is, I really like that rendering. So those photos tell a story. That's not the major point of the selection this time, but just to show what kind of photographs. I often take pictures also to train them, what I will call the muscular aspect of my photographic vision. You have to take pictures and make bad pictures or not interesting pictures too, to just train your process. Again, those two pictures in Rome, the CCD is not very sensitive to low lights, so that's basically end of the day, the sunset in Rome. So you see that the darker parts of the photos, I've pushed them in post-production, but bring back the noise of that CCD sensor, again with the Super Angulon 21mm, which on this this is the only M format Leica camera that has 2/3 basically, not a full frame sensor. So the 21mm basically gives you a 28mm. Same setup, again with better lighting condition on the left. That was at a conference, the room for preparation for the speakers. And on the right, one of the speaker actually presenting stuff. Yeah, you can see the precision and the really smooth rendering and interesting color science behind that particular camera on the left, combined obviously to the same super angle and 21mm lens. And on the right, here I pushed the low lights from the digital file, and you see that's definitely the grain you get with that kind of sensor. So I do find it interesting. I do actually like the rendering. It often brings up green hues and magenta, but yeah, I think it's got some meat to it. Again, same setup with other lighting conditions. Yeah, this lens, Super Angulon, really is interesting. Gives you actually a really interesting bokeh. Very good resistance to flare, in my opinion, for an old lens composition. And yeah, very compact setup. Here, M8 again. I believe the color rendering is really the M8 type color rendering that you will get if you find one of those old cameras and start using them. Something that brings you back to Kodachrome, and yeah, very, very particular color science in this camera, which definitely changed with the M240 and the later cameras. Here, same setup. To remember, maybe the M8 camera had no infrared filter on the sensor, so you do get probably some part of the IR part of the spectrum that actually modifies the image quality. But yeah, I do like it. I do use it a lot. So that's basically the other pictures are also Rome. That's near Rome on the seaside. Again, we're during the pandemics. That's still Rome. Same thing. M8 CCD super angle and 21mm. Often when I go and travel, I try to have one rather fixed digital setup, maybe one or two extra lenses, compact. Except if I have really a specific work to do, I'll go for something that I'll enjoy carrying around and just taking pictures with. Same setup again. The pictures here are not that interesting, in my opinion. They do, however, tell a story. The one on the left might take place in one of the projects I have. That's also the way I sometimes work. I collect photos and have a few different projects with different stories I'm trying to tell, and yeah, I might include them in the narration. The right picture was basically in the train station of Lausanne in Switzerland. Yeah, happened to see this gravel train passing by. Might use it. And again, yeah, what I was saying before, practicing the photographic muscle, I call it. Yeah, I like taking a few pictures a day or more, even if I have no real goal, just to practice and see adapt yourself to your equipment, and also maybe find things you wouldn't have thought of. So same setup here, M8 Super Angulon. Still same setup. That month will really focus on CCD sensors because I'm using the M8, and after I'll be showing you another camera, photos from another camera. Again, I really like this. It's only a 10 megapixel sensor, but yeah, that kind of work doesn't require very high resolution pictures. It's a composition to me that counts. The picture on the right is before sunrise. with the fog. So if you use this kind of camera, old cameras that are not very sensitive to light, you basically work like with film. It's an interesting combination. I would recommend not relying too much on those new sensors with their incredible sensitivities. Very useful. I do enjoy my more modern cameras, but it's interesting also to be stuck in film range sensitivities. Those next two pictures, so I was saying we're talking about CCDs today. So that's with the medium format Leica reflex system and with this S2 body. So yeah, an old CCD from Kodak, a Pentax 45mm f4.0 lens adapted to it. Very neutral. To me, it's a very neutral. Both photos it's a very neutral setup. Kind of like it. Working with medium format is definitely something else. You can basically do the same thing with a wider angle lens and full frame, or even with an even wider lens and a smaller micro four thirds type sensor. But it's not the same. You don't position yourself in the same way. So it's definitely not the same feeling, not the same result to me. It's not the same process. So I really find it interesting working with this medium format sensor. Even so, it's not that medium format compared to medium format film. And here, talking about film, those two photos we're going back to smaller cameras. That's a Canon MC camera from 1984. It's an autofocus, auto exposition camera with 35mm f2.8 lens. You can't manipulate the settings, but it's pretty good at what it does. The geometry is a little bit, tends a small amount of distortion, but the color rendering of the lens, included lens, is great. And that's with the Kodak Gold 200 film. That was in Aral, so in the early July of the same year. And this camera is interesting because you basically can manipulate it, use it, start it, take the picture, close it using one hand. It's fast. It's got a motor, so it's a bit noisy. That's the only problem it has. But it has also a small, very tiny module with a flash, which has separate AA batteries in it. So it's interesting. It's an interesting setup to do street photography. If you want something really fast, it's a good option. Many people use the Olympus mute cameras. Canon had this 1984 camera, which is interesting. Different rendering, different character. And the left picture, well, basically sunlight. Right picture, that's with the added flash. In the French version of this video, I was thinking it's in Arles. It's not in Arles. It's in Switzerland, so it's not the same climate. But the flash definitely makes that warm and flashy effect on the closer flowers. Then again, same camera, because I tend to have many small cameras with different films in them, and I don't use them that much. So I take 2, 3, 4 photos and then change small film portable camera, and so I get many places in one film. And again, that's typical of my stuff. I always have lots of dust on my films, and I don't really care for that kind of work. I actually believe it gives it some character, but that's San Francisco. Same film, same camera. San Francisco on the left, actually near Half Moon Bay. That's on the right. So the ocean on the right, San Francisco Bay on the left. And finally, last photo for this month's photographic notes, going back to S2 Leica medium format with Pentax 45mm f4.0. This very, in my opinion, neutral rendering, which I kind of find interesting per se, because it's this photo is not that interesting, but I often try to use that kind of setup neutral setup to practice my eye and try to say something even in the less inspirational settings. So yeah, hopefully this was enjoyable to you, a bit entertaining. And if you want to ask questions or comments, feel free beneath this video. And see you next time.